His alarm would go off before sunrise, not a phone, not a clock. The first light bleeding through a small window would be enough. He would rise before anyone else in the house, step out into the cold air and find somewhere quiet. A rooftop, a hillside, a corner of the street where no one could find him. And he would pray. Then he would go to work. Manual labor. 12 hours. Hands in stone and wood. Sweat, dust. A client who probably underpaid him. We know the miracles. We know the Sermon on the Mount. We know the cross. But almost nobody talks about the 90% of Jesus' life that looked exactly like yours. I spent 30 days simulating what scholars, archaeologists, and the gospel writers themselves describe as the actual daily routine of Jesus of Nazareth, and I transposed every single detail into the modern world. What I found changed how I see everything. Let's start with what the text actually says, because most people get this wrong. Jesus was not born into privilege. He grew up in Nazareth, a village so small, so insignificant, that when one of his future disciples first heard about him, his response was, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" That's in John 1:46. That's not an insult invented later. That was the common perception. Nazareth was a backwater, a forgotten town in the hills of Lower Galilee. Archaeological excavations conducted in recent decades have painted a precise picture of what that life looked like. Professor Jonathan Reed of the University of Laverne, who co-authored Excavating Jesus, describes villages in first-century Galilee as places of mud walls, thatched roofs, and stone floors, no imports, no ornate decoration, no running water. Villages of maybe 1,000 people at most, where everyone knew everything about everyone. Jesus' family was not poor in the way of destitution, but they were working class in the truest sense of the phrase. Mark 6:3 records what his neighbors called him, the carpenter. Not the carpenter's son, the carpenter himself. The Greek word used is tekton. It doesn't mean the refined craftsman with a clean workshop. It means artisan, builder, the person you called when something needed to be constructed or repaired, in wood, in stone, whatever the job required. In a region where timber was scarce but stone was everywhere, Jesus of Nazareth was likely as much a stonemason as a woodworker. He learned this trade from Joseph. He worked this trade for most of his life. The Gospels give us almost no detail about the years between age 12 and age 30. That silence speaks loudly. For roughly 18 years, Jesus of Nazareth worked. He woke up, picked up his tools, completed his jobs, came home, observed the Sabbath, went to the synagogue and started again. Here is what that looks like in a modern city. What's this wisdom that has been given to him? What are these remarkable miracles he is performing? Isn't this the carpenter? Mark 6:2-3. The people of his hometown asked this question in shock. They had watched him work for decades, and they had no idea who they were standing next to. 5:30 a.m. before the city wakes up, the Gospels are consistent on this point. Mark 1:35 records, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Luke 5:16 says he regularly withdrew to lonely places to pray. This was not an occasional spiritual exercise. This was the first habit of every single day. In the simulation, this meant one thing: no phone for the first hour, no notifications, no news. No social media scroll while the coffee brews, just silence and intentional thought, and whatever version of prayer means something to you. I sat on my apartment balcony in the dark before the traffic started, and I stayed there for an hour. It is harder than it sounds. After about 15 minutes, every part of your brain starts manufacturing reasons to check something: an email, the weather, anything. The discomfort of stillness in the modern world is almost physical. But archaeologists who have studied first-century Jewish religious life note that prayer was not optional or private in Jesus' culture. It was structural. Jewish men recited the Shema morning and evening. They observed set times of prayer. The synagogue was the center of community life. Spirituality was not separated from daily existence. It was woven through it. Jesus didn't just pray because he was the Son of God. He prayed because he was a first-century Jewish man who understood that the day didn't belong to him. After the morning prayer, the workday began. In a modern equivalent, Jesus of Nazareth would likely be a construction worker, a general contractor, or a skilled tradesman. He would commute to a job site, he would carry equipment, he would deal with clients, with schedules, with the physical exhaustion of working with his hands under the sun for 10 to 12 hours. The archaeological record from Galilee is clear on this. Life for people like Jesus was not light. Professor Reed describes first-century Galilean labor as fairly hard, a difficult life, lots of menial labor, fairly intensive labor. You worked until the light ran out, but here is what the text adds that archaeology cannot measure. Jesus did this work with his full attention on the people around him. His parables, the stories he would later tell to thousands, are saturated with the imagery of daily labor. A farmer planting seeds, a woman losing a coin and searching the entire house, a builder testing his foundation, a merchant evaluating pearls. These were not illustrations he invented in a library. These were the scenes he had lived daily for 30 years. He paid attention to ordinary life, every single day. That was the classroom. Comment below. When was the last time you were fully present in an ordinary moment? Let's talk about what he ate. This is where the simulation gets surprisingly concrete. First-century Jewish dietary life in Galilee was governed by two forces: kosher law and economic reality. You ate what was local, what was seasonal, and what you could afford. The archaeological record from villages like Capernaum and Magdala, towns where Jesus spent significant time, reveals a diet built around bread, fish from the Sea of Galilee, legumes like lentils and beans, olives and olive oil, figs, dates, and occasionally dried meat. That was it, largely. No processed food, no sugar beyond honey and dried fruit. No meat most days. Meat was expensive and reserved for celebrations or sacrifices. Water was the drink of daily life, occasionally diluted wine. The Smithsonian's landmark investigation into first-century Galilee, published in their archives, notes that imports were almost non-existent in villages like Nazareth. You ate what the land around you produced. In the simulation, I ate 2 simple meals a day. Morning, bread with olive oil, a handful of dried fruit, water. Evening, lentil stew, fish, bread, no snacks, no coffee afternoon. No alcohol except a small amount of wine with the evening meal. Within 5 days, something shifted. The brain fog that I didn't even know I had, the low grade, constant noise of blood sugar swings and caffeine dependency, started to clear. I was sleeping better. I was less anxious. I was present in a way that felt unfamiliar. I want to be careful here. I am not claiming this was miraculous. I am saying it was noticeable. The Gospels describe Jesus eating with everyone, with the poor, with tax collectors considered traitors to their own people, with Pharisees who were his intellectual opponents, with fishermen, with women who had been excluded from religious life. The meal was never just about food. Luke 22:27 records, Jesus describing himself this way, "I am among you as one who serves." At the table, in the ordinary act of sharing a meal, that habit in a modern city looks like this. You eat with people you wouldn't normally eat with. You give your full attention to whoever is at the table. You don't check your phone. In 30 days, I had some of the most significant conversations of my year at a dinner table. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because what's coming next is the part that surprised me most about this entire simulation. Here is the part nobody expects. Jesus was not a recluse. He was not hiding in a monastery. He was not building walls between himself and messy, complicated people. He was in the market. He was at weddings. He was at the homes of people considered untouchable by respectable society. He walked into places that religious leaders of his time would never enter. The Gospels record him touching a man with leprosy, a disease that made you legally untouchable, forced you to call out unclean, unclean as you walked through public spaces so that people could get away from you. Jesus doesn't step back. He reaches out and touches him. Mark 1:41. That was an act that his entire cultural context said you simply did not do. In first-century Galilee, social and economic stratification was intensifying in ways that sound remarkably familiar. There was a small ruling class. There was a large working population that lived with the daily anxiety of where tomorrow's bread was coming from.